And so when I came into solar, there's a couple things that I had going for me, whether through ignorance or something that I did. I knew that it was going to work. I just knew it.
Welcome back to Case Studies. I am here with a person who's really special to me. And for me, it's actually fun to be able to tell you that you're really special to me because over the years, you don't really have too many opportunities just to call somebody up and say, hey, you're a really special friend to me. Like you're a really important person in my journey, and you have been. And so I'm here with my good friend, Ty Williams. He's as dynamic as any leader that I've ever worked with. And to say you're the best is that it's a hard word because there's so many great people, but you're one of the best leaders and managers of people that I've ever worked with in any industry and all the stuff I've done. So really excited to go spend some time with you.
Well, thanks, man. Super nice of you to say. It's awesome. Like it's crazy as I was driving here to think about time is so funny. Like to think about like our journey started together, 20 years ago almost?
Which seems like yesterday.
I know. Like in some ways, like so much stuff has happened.
Yeah.
We're completely different people. But at the same time, it could have been 2 weeks ago.
I think about reading the scriptures, and there's this, I don't even know what it is, but it talks about time passing as if it was a dream.
Yeah.
And I think about that and I'm like,
I think about it all the time.
Time kind of passes like it was a dream, and that, our relationship is that. It was 20 years ago, but it literally, I can remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
And I think it was because it was such an emotional time for me. It was such a charged time. In my career at that point, I was a young guy. I was 24 years old. And the company that I was working with just went bankrupt. And so I was switching from that company to Apex.
And it was the biggest news in my world. Like when that happened, like
it was this tiny niche industry, but it was a big deal. Like, one, it's global financial crisis. So like from the macro, all of like the stuff that was imploding was affecting everything else. Like the big thing that blew up the company that I was working with was the founders had invested in like these real estate funds, and the real estate was blowing up, and that ultimately ended up taking down their business. But we came over to Apex, and at that point, Apex did home security systems. And we were coming into this industry, and it was a new sell for me. I had done satellite systems door to door, and it was a new sell. I was more of a senior guy at that company, and I was coming in a junior role at this new company. Didn't know how to manage, didn't know how to sell,
Had you sold at the previous company though?
I'd sold 3 years. So
you did sell and you worked your way up.
I actually had
just kind of out of it.
I was a really good salesperson. I was actually a really good recruiter, and I was a really good leader of people though. Like I had like the core skills to be really good at Apex, but I didn't have the technical skills. I didn't have like the institutional knowledge. And I remember you were one of the first guys I met, and you were so cool to me from day one, and like literally took me. And what's fascinating about this now, you don't realize stuff's moving so fast, so you don't like break this stuff down in the moment. But you didn't have any incentive to be nice to me. Like you didn't get paid on me, and if anything, like I was actually kind of a competitor. And I think this is probably a compliment to you that you weren't threatened by me. Like, so you had like actually like enough self-confidence and, belief in yourself and what you were about and what you were doing that I wasn't a threat to you. Where there was other people within the organization that I was a threat to them. They, felt like I was coming in and was encroaching on something that was theirs and like weren't very nice to me. And I still just remember that like at a pivotal point in my life, how you kind of took me under your wing, and literally this changed my career in door-to-door sales. I sat down with you, and at that year you were running the Pittsburgh office.
Yeah, I was remembering you came in 2008.
Uh-huh.
So before 2008, you went to Austin that year, 2008, right?
Yep.
And then I went to Pittsburgh. You know, there's probably people that are listening to this show that were like born in like 08.
No doubt.
Does that blow your mind?
No,
Like,
it truly does. But I remember the year before you guys had crushed. You guys had done Minnesota. Was it Minnesota the year before?
no, so Minnesota was 07. That was my first year as like a manager on my own.
Yeah.
Jordan and I were there.
Was it Florida the year before? Where did you
Florida
do?
was 12.
You did
So-
someplace that you like smashed it.
Yeah, so my career accelerated, went Concord, California first.
Yep.
And I always say the high side of average, like nothing special, but just a salesperson, recruited like probably a third of the team. The second year, Virginia. And, you know, I did better in sales, but I didn't quite have myself together 100% yet. And then my third year, I actually got really serious about it and sold a ton. So that was the year that I sold a lot and started to contribute to a management team. And then year 4, 07 was Minnesota. So that was the year that Jordan and I were the top first year team, went out and just, you know, kind of figured it out. It was weird because that year it didn't seem like, I'm on my own now and like we're running our own team. I was so well prepared through the leadership that I had received that, you know, it's kind of like I'm teaching my daughters to backflip on the trampoline. So yesterday was like big backflip day, and my girls got the backflip on their own. They set like a goal at the beginning of the year, like on their goal sheet, and one of them was do a backflip. So yesterday we went hard on the backflips. But when you're teaching somebody, you know, you hold them completely, and then you guide their back and knock their legs over.
Yeah.
And you do kind of less and less and less. So by the time I don't touch them, they don't really realize they're doing it on their own. That's literally how my whole career has been. Like, I've been surrounded by such incredible leaders that it's like, I don't really know where I learned how to do that, but I know how to do it. And so then 08 was the year that you came in. You went to Austin, I went to Pittsburgh, and that year really changed my life.
I mean, you guys were unstoppable that year, but I rewind to my personal experience. And the reason why I'm taking some time on this, because I think it's reflective of your career. I think it's reflective of the reason that you've been so effective for so many years and at so many positions and so many companies. We went to lunch. You literally
At Malawi's Pizza.
Yeah. You laid out the entire playbook.
Yeah.
How you recruit, how you do meetings, how you do May, June, July, August, holidays. And I'm just like this like desperate student taking notes. But then I think the second thing that you did was you gave me references. And I remember you told me, go interview Alan Swick, go interview Dan Little, go interview Scott Brown, go interview who's the fifth one? There was Cheyenne Thatcher.
Mm.
And I went and I interviewed all these guys that were similar. They were top percentile managers. And I got these 5 distinct views of how to be successful. They were all very unique, but they had like pieces that really resonated with me. And ultimately that ended up being my philosophy on how to manage. And it was so helpful for me that summer. And, you know, that plus so many other things that, you know, you can't see the end from the beginning, but I look back and I'm like, I wouldn't have had the career that I had if you wouldn't have done that. And I don't think I've ever told you that. And, you know, super grateful for it. Like it means a lot. And I can't imagine how many countless, I mean, you've worked with over 100,000 people at this point, you know, 20 years later, just so many people and so many opportunities to mentor and lead. But that was kind of an intimate personal experience that I had. And I think about how many people that I've had the chance to pay it forward to. And it's this beautiful, virtuous, kind of like the circle of life, kind of the good stuff in life, you know?
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. It's hard to take any kind of credit for it because, I don't know. I'm thinking about how to describe it, but one of my core like leadership, like truths that I know is you have to bring people together. Like, of all of the things that I've learned, like if I were to say, okay, these are like the 5 most important things, you know, a really clear vision, like knowing what you're building, being able to dial it and break it down into like metrics, having good systems, but above all things, bring people together. And, you know, when I started in this industry, I recruited a lot of people for next to no incentive, you know, like but I didn't know, like nowadays the people that come into this industry, like some of their dads did it. You know?
Oh, for sure.
And like their uncles have done it.
It's an established industry.
Yeah. Like, I teach this church class. I was teaching seminary the other day and I was talking to these 16-year-old kids. And, one of the kids in the class is Jeff Gallivan's nephew.
Wow.
Yeah. His name is Tyler Gallivan. And he was saying like, oh, you know, my my uncle, I think, Jeff. And I was like, I've traveled the world with your uncle. I've been in the most deep and intimate like foxholes with him. Like, do I know him? Like, I like part of me like is like, you know what I mean? Like I know him so well. And so like, I always think like now the view of the industry is different. We didn't have that. Like I didn't know anybody that had done, I call it street sales. I didn't know anyone that had done street sales when I got into it. I didn't know no one was making a career out of it. You know, it was strictly, you do this job in the summer to make some money to graduate school debt free. That was as big as the vision was. And so when I got recruited, I didn't have this massive vision. In fact, it's probably been one of the things that I don't want to necessarily call it a regret because it really helped me find myself later. But if I were to call it that, is it took me too long to see that vision. You were someone that saw it a lot faster. Yeah. Maybe it was your previous experience or something like that, but I want to talk about that in a minute. But that first year, it was like, hey, I'm going to California. I'm doing this door-to-door thing. It's probably going to be hard. I don't want to go by myself. I might as well bring buds. And so I just told people about it and brought people. I thought it was cool that we were getting dinners paid for. Yeah. I remember my very first recruiting dinner was with Keith Nellison and like Mealy at the Outback Steakhouse up the road. And I was like, I remember Keith ordered 2 entrees. I thought it was the wildest thing. And he's like, he ordered lobster and steak. And I was like, I just like.
Your head exploded.
Yeah. I'm like, this is so excessive. And now I'm like, I'm not going Outback. You know what I mean? Like I'm not above it. It's just
well, it's crazy. I still remember kind of that same desperation college kid. You know, I remember getting invited to go to Cafe Rio, and Cafe Rio is a treat. You know, it's like to go spend $10 on a burrito. I'm not eating, tuna and crackers. Yeah. And I remember like eating half my burrito, and I'm like, this would be a nice little burrito. I'm gonna take this home. And I took it home, and I still remember one of my roommates ate that half of my burrito, roommate, dude. And it crushed me. Like it was like, kind of waited all night. I was looking forward to this little, smothered pork burrito that night. It's so funny how these like memories come
like, no
back
matter what happens today, the burrito's at home.
That half a burrito still hurts me. How do I remember that meal 20 years later? But I was so pissed at my buddy.
But I think that idea of like, hey, like I've always thought that this career, this job is a really cool project. Like I've always thought it was cool.
You always loved it.
Yeah. I've always loved like take a step back. It's a wild thing that we get to do. Yeah. Right. Like if I always think about like how 17-year-old me would feel about the job. Right. And it's like, oh, I don't have to wear a tie to work. Like that's kind of cool. And like, oh, I like the people that I work with. Yeah. I get to travel. I get to like have autonomy. I get to like see the world. I get to try stuff. Like it is the coolest job in the world. I've always actually thought it was really cool. Like even when it had a certain stigma of like, whatever the negative stereotype is, I always thought it was pretty cool. And so fast forward, like when I was recruiting people, I'd be like, I just want you to come. Like I'm there. I'd rather have you there. Like I just want my friends there. Yeah. And so I remember when you came into, you and your whole crew, like there was a whole crew that came over at that time. Yeah, like Tunes came over at that time. Mendez came over at that time. Swiss came into our lives like at that time. Like all that group came over together. And I was like, this is freaking cool. Like it was a big like nod of like validity to what we were doing. Cause we'd compete for TV sales, for pest control, whatever, all the other things that we did. I was like, here's a group of people that are coming to alarms at the time turned into automation. And then when you reached out, I was like, dude, this is awesome. Like however I can help. And then later you learn, I have times where I wasn't always like that, and so later you learn the scarcity mindset, but I don't think it's born in us. Like, I don't think it's
kind of the survival mind. Like, what I experienced from you was a little more innocent. It was a little more pure. You know what I mean? And maybe it was just because you hadn't like had the scar tissue on your back.
I just didn't even think about it. Like, so again, like I appreciate the compliment, but I don't feel like I weighed out the risks and despite share. I was like, sweet. But that's a really common trait amongst people that I admire. It's something that you do constantly. Yeah. Is people that have had success are generally pretty happy to share it.
I aspire to it. Yeah. I aspire to be that person that's not scarce, that's abundant. Yeah. That like literally is the give the shirt off your back friend in the community. And for me, like I've thought about this a lot. You know, I went to this Tony Robbins Business Mastery event. It was probably 5 or 6 years ago.
Is that the one in Florida?
And everybody will say like cliche, it changed my life, but it 100% changed my life. And there was a piece of it that I remember he articulated some language in a way that I had never thought about, but I had experienced, I'd felt my whole career. And he said that business is a spiritual game. And I was like, I feel the spirit. I feel connected more in business than almost anything else that I do. And I'm like, what is it? You know, and he actually put some additional language on like his philosophy on like fulfillment, like true happiness is you are fulfilled when you're growing at a high level and when you're serving at a high level, growing and giving. And I think about that job and business in general and entrepreneurship and being a leader, it stretches you to your absolute limits. And so you a tremendous amount of growth, but also like you're serving all the time. And like what I experienced from you is service. And like when I go to bed just so fulfilled at night, it's that I like poured myself into the people that I worked with and I added value to their life. You know what I mean? It's not about me. Yeah. It's about like adding value. And I think, you know, people ask me like, hey, how do you like that job? And I was like, I love that job. A piece of me will always be.
Yeah. It kind of just is who you are.
Yeah. But I didn't love knocking doors. I liked it. I actually like when I was in it, it was a game and it was fun, but that wasn't what I loved about it. What I loved was all the personal growth that I experienced. And I loved the people that I did it with and like building people and like taking them from, I don't have a skill set to I can, you know, pay for school or I can start a business. And even today, like my life every day, like literally every day consists of somebody that I worked with and served over the last 20 years that has moved on, that started a business, that has a family, and I get to connect with them and reconnect on life. And it's so fulfilling. You know, you were a part of that. This conversation is that.
Yeah.
We were a part of each other's journey, you know, and hopefully added value. You know, I know what you've done for me, but I always aspired to add a lot of value to you and Jordan and like literally anything. Like it's always been, if there's an ask, it's yes.
Yeah.
And unless there's no way I can do it, it's yes. You know, the default answer is yes.
Yeah, that's real. And that's something you should be proud of because that's true. It's, you know, Anne Frank said no one ever became poor by giving, right? And so it's like, if you say yes to like help people develop, first of all, like they don't really reach out unless they're pretty serious about it or they don't follow through. So it's like really no time waste.
Yeah.
And it's this weird like law that you don't run out. Like it's almost like, oh, if I said yes to everybody that asked for advice, I wouldn't have time to get stuff done. But that's not how it works out. Or like, hey, if I give financially to everybody that requests it, I'm not going to have enough. But there's this weird thing in the universe that doesn't let that happen.
I don't know how it works. And it fascinates me. And this is like a major, me and you've talked about this a bunch of times and it's a major theme, but like the wealthiest people that I know, both in happiness and money, are also the most generous with their time and with their resources. They give time and they give financially, like actively. And somehow it just comes back tenfold. And I've experienced it in my life. Like the abundance that I experience in my life, every day, it just blows my mind. And I think so much of it it's just like this principle that I don't fully understand in the universe, but it works. I just know it works.
There's this book called Happy Money. This guy named Ken Honda wrote it.
Never read it. No.
You'd love it. It's a short, like, listen. You're going to Lake Powell today, so listen to it on your drive down. Well, I guess you're probably flying down.
We're driving.
Okay.
Yeah.
Back to your roots, man.
Old
Look
school.
at you.
Yeah.
Old school.
Yeah.
But he basically starts with this story where in Japan, they have, some of it gets lost in translation, but like they have this concept of happy money. So the author is a Japanese dude, and somebody takes his wallet and says, "Can I see your wallet?" Which that'd be a crazy thing for me to ask of you. Can I see your wallet? Right? She takes his wallet and like flips through it, and then she flips through the money and puts it back and says, "You have happy money." And it's this idea that like it's alive, like it responds. And so basically what she said is you kind of have good energy, you have proper principles around this idea of abundance and money, which means like if you go to pay a bill, are you like, oh, this freaking bill, man, this is killing me. It's going up every single month. Or is it like, wow, I got electricity. Like I have running water and it was $130.
Yeah.
And I'm putting this into there and the infrastructure is going to get even better.
Yeah.
And there's people that work for this company that can have a living. This is good. Like it's a positive thing. Or, you know, somebody needs some money for something. Is it like, oh, dude, you're always hitting me up? Or is it like, wow, I'm in a position to help somebody. I can't imagine if I was in a position needing that help. And so the book goes through and it kind of hits on the principles. And I have to catch myself in that sometimes because you try to manage your resources and be a good steward.
Of course.
But there's this counterintuitive thing where it's like, you never become poor by giving. Like you have to be deliberate and smart about it. But if you employ commerce with like the right intention, think about that.
So I had this experience over the weekend. My daughter had her business fair, and it's all of the kids in class.
How old is which daughter?
She's 9 years old.
At the business fair.
Yeah, it's the coolest thing. They're in this rad school, and every kid starts a business. So you've got every kid in class that has to like set up their lemonade stand or set up their like embroidery shop, or they got to go figure out how they're going to go make money, and then they got to go market. And it's the coolest thing.
That's like what you do in an MBA.
It's my favorite part of their whole class. And I'm walking out the door and I've got this, you know, bag that I have cash in that like, it's a habit. This is something that when you talk about like, abundance, this is my daily exercise of abundance because I have it ready. And when I have an inkling or an urge and it's scarce or abundant, and I get to exercise that abundance. So I've got like my little abundance bag and I'm walking out the door and it's full of hundreds. And I'm like, oh man, I don't have any 20s in here, you know? And then I just have this thought and I'm like, I'm going to go make some kids' day today. And then I realized like there's like 70 booths. I'm like, this is going to cost me $7,000 today, and start going and listen to the kids pitch and give them $100 and see this kid just their mind explode and go to the next kid and go to the next kid. And I don't know how many I got through, but I got through a lot. And I went home like flying.
Mm-hmm.
I felt so good. And it was funny. Matt Stevenson texted me and he's like, hey, I heard my nephew or something that you hooked him up at the business fair. Like I haven't talked to Matt in years, but it was this experience of like, I was like, you think about like $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, like what do you spend that on in your life? There's a lot of random stuff that, you know, you're never going to see again. And that was like this random moment of making a decision to go lean in and go try to, you know, make somebody's day.
Yeah.
And it made my day. And it's actually like that. It was like this core memory where I walked out and I'm like, I need to do this every year forever.
Well, and it's weird because so think about this, like, I think it's Elon that says this. And when he first said it, it seemed a little disconnected, but he said, do you have any idea how much easier it is to make 10,000 than try to save 10,000? So if your job is like, okay, I need to miser together the $7,000 that was in your bag, right? You start to think and behave kind of different, right? Versus if you say, hey, I'm blessed, I'm industrious, to use one of the words of like your early region, like value. And you know, I'm gonna put in today. Then, dude, on the way home, a stock market thing could happen, and you made $17,000. Like, you're only in control really of the input.
You want to hear, say, your principal, same event. I'm at the event, see, you know, somebody that is an investor of ours, haven't seen him. And he grabs me and says, hey, you just gave my son $100. That was super cool. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that was his thing. He says, I've been meaning to call you. You know, I'm looking at go allocate another $500,000. Which deal should I do? And in that like afternoon, I made way more than I'd put in And I don't know if he would have found me and had the same conversation. I don't think he would have. I don't think he would have proactively came and grabbed me and said, hey, I'd like to do business with you.
Sure.
And here's the amount. And, let's go sit down and go figure out how to allocate.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I did prompted what he did.
Yeah.
But my intention wasn't to prompt what he
Sure.
did. My intention was just to go like add value. And I think that's how it works, is like if your heart is, so going back to happy money, like if your heart is right, like it just create, like there's this chain of events, that
Yeah.
you can't really forecast or you can't really predict.
I totally agree. Like it's like The Alchemist, right? They call it the universal language.
Yeah.
And every now and then you meet people and you're like, he speaks that language. And they go up and they go down, but things generally
happen.
Yeah, because
they
they're
come
employing,
together.
Yeah. And so like even like this principle of faith, like not even just like in a religious standpoint, but like, okay, all things are created twice, right? Once spiritually and once in reality. And so it's like you have to believe and put in before you get back.
You got to
right?
plant the seed.
That's yeah.
Like-
And everything in nature shows how things kind of work in
Yeah.
like the real world. And so it's weird, but even like knowing that and like reflecting on it now, I still catch myself being like, okay, like get back to the universal language, right? Don't get in this whole world of like, oh, if I gave money to everybody that asked, or if I gave time to everyone that I asked, or if I give away my secrets, these guys are going to compete against me. Those people don't have success. You can have it for a time,
Yeah.
but eventually that's not how this place works, right?
Yeah.
Eventually you have to play the game based by certain principles and then it works out,
And that's always kind of, and maybe we'll dive into that a little bit, but like, I don't know if it's natural for you, but that's always how you've operated. And I've seen it. I saw you, just have an exceptional career through Vivint, rose as kind of high as you could rise within Vivint, but then you were really early to leave. And I think a lot of people, when they look at your career, they'd say, man, that was a risky move. You kind of had everything. Like you really didn't have to, it was established. You know what I mean? You were harvesting at that point. And so I still remember I called you on the phone right when I found out that you did it. And just to acknowledge you and just say, I think that is so cool. It's 100% the right move. And I know you're going to smash, but you went all in on this new opportunity at this new company, less pay, kind of almost going backwards, if you will, from a title standpoint, stepping back into the trenches, very active role. And you just ran the table. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about decision making and how you think about decisions. Because there's one contrast, which is, and all of us see this, people that we work with that bounce around to 100 different companies. Literally, the grass is always greener. And that's never been you. You've always been extremely loyal. Wherever you're at, you go build there. But there's also been some pivots in your career where you've said strategically, this is where this is the next place I want to go build my house. And you've done it. And you've kind of, been willing to go backwards to go forward.
Yeah. Thank you. And, I don't know if you started this conversation by saying something I had done or said made an impact on you. I know what it's like to not have people celebrate your success. But I remember that phone call specifically. And I remember the language, and it was kind of the first time I'd realized what I had done, honestly. In my head, it was I'll walk you through maybe the decision-making process, but I remember you called and you said, hey, I'm a fan of big moves and this is a big move and I'm a fan. And one of the things that I love about this industry is I'm actually a fan of it. I love it. I follow people's careers the way you would follow sports. I follow people's days. I look at the stats and I'll Keith Dyer, I'll give you this example. So Keith Dyer on Saturday, we had this big company trip to Iceland. So we were in Iceland, celebrating people's success, having a great time. He's a senior leader, just moved to the Bay Area, was retired in St. George, had sold his alarm company for a good multiple, felt like his kids needed to see him working, got back into it, moved back out to Northern California. And I don't know if you know this, a lot of people are moving out of Northern California. He kind of he went to the problem, right? And then, he was dealing with some health things. And on this Saturday night, just a couple days ago, he sends me a picture of him in the neighborhood with a rep behind him, and he's got a lollipop in his hand. It was the perfect, he's just hey, Another 3-day today. This feels so good. This is a dude that has,
He's done it all.
he's got 23 years in the industry.
When I think about Keith Dyer, I think about Platinum Alarms.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about him being like one of like 3 people that ran that company.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's been doing it at the highest level for as long as anybody that I know has been doing it.
Yeah.
And so like the ability to stay curious and stay curious and to go reinvent yourself. Like I love that stuff too.
Well, and the text came in at like 6. And then by the time I called him back, he replied, he's like, hey, I'm on a date with my wife. And I was like, you just do all the right things. Like and so I'm such a fan of it because I know the story and I'm like, it's like watching a guy. It's like, hey, this guy in college, I don't think he got everything that he deserved. I think, there's some real genius in him. And then you see him do these moves. And like the Saturday thing is still such a thing for me to see somebody like not on the board yet. And then see a vet put up 3.
It's symbolic.
On a day and then take his wife on it. Anyway, so it's like a small thing, but that's I get thousands of those a week. I get pictures of, hey, here's a rep that we have this one rep, Amadou Kone. He's from Africa. And he moved to the United States and the person that was supposed to pick him up at the airport didn't show up. So he's like a late teenager and he's like on a bench for 24 hours in a new country by himself. And he figures this out. He gets picked up by like a taxi driver that takes him to his house because they're from the same area, like recognize the flag on his taxi. Anyway, he's one of our premier market leaders now.
Wow.
He just made stuff, right? And so anyway, I could talk about this all day, but I'm such a genuine fan of what people do. I think it's every bit as impressive as an athlete. Like I just see, when you watch like a great UFC fight and you're like, I would have quit 30 seconds into this. And I feel like I'm a pretty mentally strong person, but the fact that they can go 20, 25 minutes, you thought it was over in round 3 and they're deep into round 5. It's like that. I see that in what our people do, just this ability to make stuff and hold on.
Yeah. There's this interesting mix of flash.
Yeah.
Like your brother is the purest salesman that I've ever worked with ever. Like it almost feels effortless when I watch Jordan sell.
Yeah.
And his numbers, like he just, and then there's other people that doesn't come as easy.
Yeah. And he'll twitch if he hears you say that because you ever know, like you golf now.
Yeah.
You've picked up a lot of hobbies late in life from hunting. I still remember the first time the scope on your eye, like when you're hunting. But the golf, it takes a lot of work to make something look effortless, but when you see it, it's why it's like so easy to be a fan of somebody that is great in something because you're like, you just know that it took so much. Anyway, back to the idea to go to solar. I wish I could tell you that I thoughtfully analyzed it. I wish I could tell you that I did a deep dive into the financials, that I looked at the company's strategy plan, that I looked at that I got high level advice on where the market was going. I didn't do any of that. And when you say that I left so early in my career at Vivint, I felt like I was late. I was there for 10 years.
Yeah.
And so the only thing that I can attribute that to is I'm a very intuitive person. I'm a very instinctive person. And then I'll usually find analytical data to support it, but I'm generally driven first by the instinct, by the emotion. Back to business being somewhat spiritual. I can usually if you think about for your kids, if you were to think, okay, what does Callie need or what does Ava need? What do they need? You can generally be like, okay, well, they're at this point you just know.
Yeah.
Right. Because you spend so much time thinking about it and it's like your life. So it's where your heart is and where your head is. Right. And so I always say that creativity is the result of a curious and engaged mind. A lot of people will say to me, you're very creative. And I look at these things and the move to solar to me was so obvious. It was so you looked at it as high risk.
I actually didn't look at it as high risk. It was uncomfortable. And I think that's what I admired. I didn't, there wasn't a second that I didn't think you'd be running that town in the shortest amount possible. There was never an ounce of risk. It was a lot of people in your position would have chose comfort and security over opportunity and adventure. And you chose opportunity and you bet on yourself. And that was what I loved so much. Because I was there's 12 people that actually could make that same move today. It's there for all 12 of them.
Yeah.
Go manage a team with the promise that if you do well, you'll rise in a growing organization. But somehow you did it and you just went 2 feet in. And again, like you look at the outcome, you look at where you're at today, you're actually exactly where I knew you would be. Like there was not an ounce of doubt that where you're at today, I thought that you would be there when you went, but I admired that you went.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And I think there was some risk that I was ignorant to. Financials, the state of solar at the time, like the politics, like there was some risk there, but I felt like I needed to hurry and do it, or else those other 10 or 15 people were going to do it first.
Yeah.
So I always joke, like, you remember Old School with, Will Ferrell?
Yeah.
So, when his wife rolls up on him and he's like running through the plaza naked and she's like, Frank? And they're like, what are you doing? And he's like, everybody's doing it. And he looks back and he's completely alone. Like it felt a little bit like that. I was like, dude, everybody's going to come. I better get out ahead of this. And then I had a lot of people be like, are you insane? And I was like, everybody's doing it. And I look back and there was like,
no one.
Yeah. I mean, me and Jason Crown came over together.
Yep.
But for the first year, I didn't recruit like anybody from my past contacts. I had a whole career in, street sales and I didn't recruit a single person. The first one was Jordan and that ruffled some feathers, but he was a grown man and can do what he wants to do, But intuitively, I was really excited at the prospect, choosing comfort. Dude, I was 30 years old.
Yeah.
Like you don't choose comfort when I'm 42 and I don't it terrifies me to think, oh, I should slow down, because to me, again, one of my things that I really believe is most frustration in life comes from enjoying the perks before you've done the work. So you buy that.
That's so profound.
But think about it. You're frustrated because you bought an expensive car before you actually had the money.
Yeah.
And so now this thing creates all this anxiety, or you got the title before you developed and now you're stuck or you're frustrated, or you took the vacation, but you didn't do the volume first. And so now your vacation sucks, right?
Yeah.
And so when I look at slowing down, I could either do that right now and enjoy things now, but that really changes what it looks like when my kids have kids, right? And so I don't know, I'd love to say that I value adventure and, I'm fascinated by the art of possible and what is actually attainable that we haven't seen yet. But I actually think at the core, I really do value security, which means I feel like I have to do everything that I can right now.
But it's a different paradigm, and I actually think that I've talked to a bunch of people about door-to-door sales and sales in general, but specifically that skill set. And I think about the amount of risk that I've taken in my career and the types of risk. And to me, they've never been risky.
Yeah. It doesn't feel risky. That's
it doesn't bother me at all, because I just know that my backup plan is go do what I know I can do and make a high income. So I've always felt like plan B, I know what plan B is, and I'm certain of that. So I can go try something new because I already, and so it gave me this confidence. And when 100%. You're talking about making that choice, your family's not going to not eat ever. You have a skill set that your family will always eat, right. You'll always be taken care of. And so it's, it allowed me, and it obviously has allowed you, and I think a lot of other people, to take risks that I think somebody, without going back to kind of your principle of enjoying the perks before doing the work, if you haven't earned that ability to produce value in the marketplace, if you don't have that ability to create wealth out of thin air, you see risk differently. You see the job that has a salary and has insurance as safe, and you see the variability with, no downside, but also unlimited upside as risk, where somebody that has that skill, they see the salary as risky.
100%.
Because it caps.
It's so expensive.
It caps your life.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's fascinating, psychology, because the way that you're walking through this, I did one of these with Todd, and we were talking about, the way that he lives today. Everybody looks at the way he lives today and they're just like, these lifestyles, the rich and famous. I mean, he's literally flying on a G650 almost on a daily basis to go watch his kids race Porsche 911.
It's otherworldly.
GT2 RSs, in Miami and San Francisco and all over.
Which is the right way to do it. If you have those like Porsche lifestyle race, he's doing it right, in fairness.
But when I met Todd and when you met Todd, that wasn't Todd.
No.
I mean, Todd was in an apartment.
So I knew him when he was renting the property just up the street from here.
Yeah.
It was, you could ride a bicycle there in 5 minutes from this building.
But he was our age.
I know. It blows my mind.
He was 40. And he had made a lot of money. He'd had multiple exits up until that point. We were actually having this conversation. And kind of that like marshmallow principle. Do you want a marshmallow today or do you want 2 down the road? And for him, he was just like 10 down the road. I will take nothing right now further down the road. And that's always been easy for me. But it's not easy for a lot of people. But what you're describing, that is what's driving your decisions is, I want to sacrifice today to have freedom next year and next month and 10 years from now, and you've always done that. It's kind of been a double down your whole life.
Yeah.
It's not like you've missed out on anything. Like
it's enhanced everything.
Yeah.
Like I think, other thing to say about that interview with Todd is it's funny because to me, he probably is like the biggest thinker that I know.
Yeah.
And in that interview, he says, I just didn't think big enough. And it's like, if you're not thinking like, and the impact and like, right. Yeah. And also the generosity factor, like, dude, when that man at his funeral, like we will learn so much like about where he's been giving.
Well, he kind of had his funeral. Like he kind of did his retirement party.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was kind of an early funeral. That's funny. It was fun to be able to have everybody there and talk about how he influenced them. Yeah. And you just realized like, you're never poor by giving, and
that's right. But that pocket. So like, I picked up surfing late in life. So like I have this philosophy that if you're a leader, you should be a beginner in something because it makes your brain work kind of right. And it gives you empathy for the people that you're leading. And if you want the most humbling endeavor to pick up as a late 30s person, start surfing. It is the hardest thing. Anyways, so there's this concept of like the pocket, right? So where you want to be on a wave it's called the pocket. It's where all the speed is generated. It's where the acceleration comes in. It's the most fun. It makes all your equipment work right. And it's a small spot. It'd be like the sweet spot on one of your clubs or something like that. But if you get a little ahead of the pocket, you lose all the speed, the wave will hit you in the back. If you're too high above it, the wave can pass you completely. So all of like making it work is kind of like finding this pocket. So I feel like this idea, like people have this idea that you're going to make money and then you're going to stop working, right? You've made money. Have you stopped working? You just introduced me to your whole new business upstairs.
Yeah.
Right. Like we're doing this. Like I don't know anybody that's made money and completely stopped working.
I actually do know some of those. So I have a really dear friend that, sold his company, took $200 million off the table at a young age and, quickly retired. And, he's on the board, still owns a ton of equity. And I think anybody from the outside world would look at his life and say he has it all. Like he's got, $30 million house on the beach in Miami. He's literally traveling the world everywhere. And he came and hung out at my house this weekend. And he doesn't have kids. He's, up until this point, chose not to have kids and had a day in the life of Casey. And we go to, we're dropping kids off, go to a dance recital. We're cooking Traeger, calling 4 of the neighbors. They come over. And I just get this message from him after, because he's in this point in life where he's like, he's 31. He's like, what do I want? And he's kind of at that spot where he's like, I want to double down and start working again. I want to start a family. It's like he's had everything that you get, all the things you do when you get money. And it, the Tony Robbins, real famous quote, he says, the table of success shouldn't be sat at very long. Like that, satisfied needs don't motivate.
Yeah.
And that it feels good to hit a goal. And it's fun to take a victory lap for like a weekend. But then it's done, and you got to find that next mountain to climb, or you're just not going to be happy.
Yeah, life's not as fun out of the pocket.
Yeah.
It's like that whole experience isn't as fun outside of the pocket. And we're built to grow. We're built to build. That's, again, look at life, look at the world. That's kind of how it works. But when back to Todd. So have you read The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek?
Yeah.
So I always say I agree with 75% of that book, which is like, it's like a perfect book to read if you're like challenging a lot of the ideas and stuff in it. But I had just done this, I haven't worked with Todd for 10 years. Right. And then we did this recruiting thing and he worked with me on it. And it was like so fun to like recruit with Todd again. And here's a guy who does not need to work, right? He doesn't need to. And a lot of people might look at, why are you helping recruit a guy to a company that you don't work for?
Yeah.
Right. And as I was thinking about that experience afterwards, I came upon this quote in The Infinite Game. And I don't know it off the top of my head, but it was something to the effect of, the point of the game isn't to win, it's to keep playing, right? And if you keep playing, then you can bless a lot of lives. And so I literally screenshot it to Todd and texted it to him. And I was like, dude, from like the outside, you've won, you've beat the game. But what a lot of people don't understand is that's not the point of the game. The point of the game is to keep playing, to keep growing, keep developing, keep investing.
So Tom Peters has this quote, and he's like, when you take like your list of like, hey, who are the 5 thought leaders that have influenced me the most? He's one of those 5 for me. And he has this quote where he's talking about excellence, and he says, building a great business is an end in and of itself.
Yeah.
Like it's actually like, it's not the money you get from the business. Building it, that is like a worthy end. And I've always, thought about that, where I'm like, just in the doing, in the creating, and like having a commitment to have a very high standard and have things that you're proud of. Like that's an end.
Yeah.
How you do anything is how you do everything.
100%.
And going back to your career, I've noticed that in every aspect of your career. It's almost been intuitive. I remember you were one of the first leaders to go create your own culture, where you said, we're going to have our own brand. We're going to have our own name. We're going to have our own guiding principles and values. We're going to do things special, and we're going to do it our way. And it wasn't about like selling t-shirts or doing but you spent as if you were building like a design company to go sell stuff on the market, and there was a level of commitment to excellence I've just noticed in every step of your career, where even like when you sell, you're like, if I'm going to sell, I'm going to be a top performer. If I'm going to manage a team, it's going to be a world-class team. If I'm going to do a region, it's going to be the highest. And that's just, it's always something that I've admired. And I think all of us admire excellence. I think when you see it, we're all drawn to it, whether it's athletics, whether it's, music or the arts. Like when you see it, we're all drawn to somebody.
It's intoxicating.
That you're right? Like, that person's poured their life into that,
Yeah. I think what it is like, I just really like doing cool stuff. Like I love like, if I'm going to do something, I want to like, I've always had this concept of, we're on this planet for a very short amount of time. And the things that we do every day, it's not like the point, right? Like the point of like, I look at like college. So I went to BYU, and it's like the point of college isn't that paper that I was writing. That's not the point, right? The point is to network and to learn how to live and get things done when no one's going to check on you, right? Like that's really what I learned in college, is how to do work that nobody cares if you do it or not, and how to network and connect and like build a life, right? And so like the knocking of the door, or the building of the team, or the structuring of the deal, that's not the point of the game, right? That's the game, but it's not like the point. And so I've always felt like this is the thing that I'm doing with my very finite time on this planet.
I could do anything.
Yeah. Like I remember the first Ford F-150 that I bought, it was summer sales money. It was after that 2007 year. And, I bought this Ford F-150, and it was bone stock. And the guy was like, all right, you're going to take delivery of your truck. And I was like, oh no, I don't want it until the custom stuff has been done yet. And he's like, you don't want to take your new truck home? And I'm like, I hate this truck until like, I don't, I hope this doesn't sound like what I worked hard for that money, but I was like, this thing kind of offends me until I'm able to like make it
your own
something cool. Yeah. And so I want to drive it around once the work is done. Once it's like, once it is what I want it to be.
So fascinating.
And so for my life and like the job, it's like, if I'm going to do a team, I want to make it awesome. Like if we're going to do a service project on Saturday morning, let's create a team name and let's create a game to see who can move the most dirt.
Yeah.
And the winner has to like gets lunch from the other. Like, let's do it, you know? And so it's largely born of that's just how I like to experience things. And so,
but I think that's why you're such a dynamic leader. Honestly, I think that's why you've been kind of put in the highest leadership roles in everything that you've done since I've known you. And I think it's that. I think it's because what you're describing is your philosophy on life. Right. It's not everybody's philosophy. We could go through a lot of different, but I think it's a success philosophy. I think what you're describing, those principles, if you build on them, you'll be successful.
Yeah.
I started on this track of doing door-to-door sales. And even when I was doing it, I was too good for it. Like if I'm really honest with myself, I was too good for that work. I thought I was better than it. I thought it was a preparatory job until I get the real job. And it took me losing everything. It took me having an event that created so much emotion and humbled me literally to my knees to really value how much that skill set meant to me. Because when I lost everything, I had one thing. I didn't wear the right watch today, but I've got a couple watches. And one of my watches is a Breitling that I bought in 2005 after my first summer. As a goal. They said, you have to set a goal, and if you hit this goal, you get it. And I bought that watch. And when I lost...
You set the goal, and then you had to buy your watch.
It was like, hey, set a goal, like something that like lights you up. Then when you hit it, go do this, go. And I did it. And then I lost everything. And I had this like $8,000 watch on and nothing else. And I'm like, what am I doing? But I think back to like this humble pie of literally like not having anything. But what I had was a skill set.
Yeah.
And it was really valuable. And I never felt the dip. I was back on my feet in a month.
I was going to say, dude, like it's funny for me to have a view of that because if I were to like give you a narrative, I thought you failed really well. Like it didn't look like to me, like, of course we heard about that. Like when Atlas went under, and from my vantage, it's like, oh, these guys are here. They're ready to work. They're going for it. And I knew, you were in that apartment at the Riverwood. So I knew that like things had been set back, but it never felt to me. If you were on your knees, I would imagine that would happen, but it never showed it. It felt like, all right, well, let's go. And that's kind of like the Atlas way, right? This idea of like, no, you can make stuff and you can produce and producers add value.
I think where I was going with that was it took me to that point to realize I'm doing this as a career. And the second that I decided, and honestly, it was Todd. I remember sitting down with Todd and seeing this guy that I really admired, that was 15 years older than me, that I admired his marriage. I admired the way he was, carried about with his faith. I admired the way he gave back to his community. I admired the business that he built. And he was so proud of his job.
Mm-hmm.
He loved it. Mm-hmm. He was so proud of it. And somehow I wasn't proud of it. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, this guy is completely proud of what he does. If it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. And it was the first time where, I said, I am all in. And that was when it switched, was if I'm going to be all in, I'm going to go be the best person that's ever done this job. And that was my mentality. And I think about how much different my career was because I decided, and you said this to me, it was actually it was an early training. It's so funny how all this stuff comes flooding back. You said, if you want to make professional money, you need to put professional work. You need to be a professional. And I remember that resonated with me so much. I'm like, how would I expect to make top 4% income and have top 1% success if I don't put in top 1% work?
Yeah.
Like, I can't expect top 1% outcomes without top 1% work.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times we do. A lot of times we try to cheat that law of the harvest. We think,
and that's where the frustration comes in.
Yeah.
You're trying to enjoy the perks before you've done the work. That visual of you in that watch is awesome. Like, it's such a, but you need to have that moment where you're like, stop. Like, we so often, like, I see this with leadership progression. Like, people are like, oh, I'm going to come in as a rep. Then I'm going to be a team leader. Then I'm going to be a market leader. Then I want to run like a region. Then I want to run like a channel. But if you stop for a second, you're like, is that what you really want? Like, are you broke and wearing an $8,000 watch? Or like, the second you get to the point where you're like, even when you said like, I'm doing this for a career, I'm going to sound like a total hippie, but I'm like a total energy person. Like, the energy in the room when you say, I'm doing this for a career, it's like, now let's go.
Yeah.
It's so like all that nervous, frantic posturing stuff goes away.
Of course.
And so, back to my decision to come to solar, it was so calming. Like, pros emit like a calming, like, feeling. You ever notice that? Like, when you're selling with somebody that's a pro, you go into a business meeting with someone that's a pro, you're like, they just, a mother that's that like
certainty.
It is. And it's just like, it calms everybody down.
Yeah.
And so when I came into solar, there's a couple things that I had going for me, whether through ignorance or something that I did. I knew that it was going to work. I just knew it. Like, and I knew that there was nothing that I would not do, that as long as, it's ethical and moral and good, I would do anything, literally anything to make it work. Cause I'm 29 years old at the time. Who cares? And it was funny. I do this thing on planes. I watch documentaries on planes. And so I've seen pretty much everything, especially every music documentary. So I'm 45 minutes into the Alan Jackson documentary on Amazon Prime. And it was talking about, there's this song, Living on Love, where he talks about his granddaddy. They started their life in this tool shed granddaddy made out in the yard, and they built a house kind of around it. Right. And so he goes to his dad, at one point, and he's like, hey, I'm going to move to Nashville and do music. And his dad gave him advice. He's like, go for it. Like, you're young. Now's the time to do it. And the song is called You Can Always Come Back Home. And I kind of feel that way with, like, if you have a skill set, if you can create business, if you can sell things, you can always go home.
You can always come back home.
That's the thing. And, I have that philosophy with people that leave our company and go elsewhere. Like, a lot of times people will say like, oh, you can always go back if it doesn't work out. And a lot of leaders will combat that. And they'll say, well, but this, and this. You can always come back. If you're great and you leave, will we take you back?
Of course.
100%. Yeah. And you'll have more experience, and you're going to pay a pretty heavy price, but if you're great, we'd love to have you back.
We're way better with you.
And there's so many people that have left, had the experience they needed to have, learned, came back, and now we're all better.
I mean, that's a fascinating insight, because it actually goes to, you got a hard stop. And so I've got a couple of questions. We could literally go on all day, but I want to touch on this point, because this is an interesting point, both specifically for, the industry that is your profession and was my profession, and also in life. So I remember Todd was notorious for forgiving people that had left his company, people that had left him sometimes in a bad way, and went and competed against him. And, and then when things don't work out, that he was very gracious in the ability for people to come back and never burning a bridge. And I think there were some people on his team always that never sat well, where it's almost kind of Count of Monte Cristo, where it's like that person, wronged you and there should be justice. Like, that person should crash and burn, or like that door should always be shut. But his business was so much better just allowing people to come back gracefully. And you look at, the equity value that was built from people that thought there was a better way, went out. It wasn't what was sold to them. And they came back humble, and they came back committed, and they came back with more experience, and they added tremendous value. What you're describing, you've experienced it, where people have left you a lot of different times, along the journey. And your business has been better by never burning a bridge. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
By never saying something you don't mean, or
Yeah. And I'm not perfect. Like I've made mistakes there. I don't know that Todd really ever has. And it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, if you hurt my kids, maybe someday there's forgiveness. You can't babysit them ever. Like, I'm not stupid, but there is a way to move past that. And I think with Todd, like one of the benefits from him having that philosophy is he never slipped outside of that. He never slipped into that thought process that drives people to be less successful. Because like, had he said, okay, you burned me, you stabbed me, and dude, it's personal. Like, this is my life. It's not my job.
It's so hurtful.
Yeah. It's like, and I'm like, dude, I'm at your wedding. And like, this is like the only one at your kid's birthday party. And you are really trying to hurt me. And dude, Seth Godin says that a leader takes it personal. It is personal. Right?
Yeah.
At the same time, if I hold it, I can't perform. I can't do as well. So you might as well let it be what it is. Understand you don't have all the information. But then when they come back around, dude, I've made mistakes and people have been gracious with me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he never got into that. I'm going to show him, or I'm a limited, or he can't come back.
I'm going to bury him.
And that's the reason that, you know what I mean?
So this is a place that I like to end. And I'm interested, again, like what I love about my career is the volume of people that I was able to share a piece of their journey. I mean, you've got 5,000, 7,000 kids that come work for a summer and have that experience. And most of them don't stay. Most of them, it's a stop on the bus. Talk to me about faith, and talk to me about how faith factors into the way that you see the world. We've talked about a lot of different philosophies on business and life. Talk to me about where faith fits in it and how you utilize that, kind of how you go about your decisions and how it impacts your decisions.
Yeah. Interesting question. Naturally, I would go to my my religious faith. Is that what you're asking?
I think it's in general. I think it's a principle, but it absolutely touches religion.
The one thing I'm grateful for that has helped me navigate, especially the last 15 years, which have been my most professional and personal growths when I've had my family. It's when I've figured out what it is that I really want to contribute from a professional standpoint, is I got really clear on my personal vision. And I think this is a place where the industry often gets it wrong. They think you need a 2-week seminar and a silence retreat and you have to starve yourself and whatever, exaggerating, but you got to figure out this manifesto that's 5 pages long. And I actually think it's a lot simpler than that. My very simple vision for my life, for my work, for my family is simply this. I believe there's more to this life than we're experiencing right now. Right? I think this is what we're doing now. And we're on this earth for a very finite, relatively short amount of time. I think our tendencies, I think we were spirits before we were bodies. And I think we lived a really long time in that state. And so I think the things that we believe and things that are natural and the people and the relationships are a lot deeper than we know. And so I believe that my purpose in this world it's my family mission statement, and it's travel well the road back home. I believe someday we're going to move on to another portion of existence. And this piece, you're going to want to look back at it and say, how'd I do? Not from a keeping score standpoint, but am I proud of it?
Yeah.
Right. And so, and honestly, it's one of the things I love about sales is it's a bit of a microcosm of life. I can look back on some of those years and say 2004, my very first summer, proud of it, not proud of it. And I'm like, yeah, for the person that I was,
for sure,
for the input, I'm like an 8.8 out of 10 proud. Then I go to my next year, 6 out of 10. I don't like the way that felt. Then I go to my next year, 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
In the pocket, I'm feeling good. And so it's something that, that's faith, right? I have to keep that. And so the reason that if I'm authentic and doing well in life in general and doing right by people, it's because I've got this vision that my kids are only small for a time. I'm not great at this, with patience and things like that. I try to be, but it's hey, the goal isn't to get them into bed by 8:15. That's what you're doing right now. But the goal is to help develop this human and help them travel well. So you gain experience. You do right by people. You employ good principles. And at the end of it, if I trust you and you burn me, I still traveled well, right? Like if I'm on a trip, right? Like, I don't want to be the one causing the, like if you ever traveled with people, like there's people that just don't travel well, where it's like, you need a lot.
Yeah.
And you complain a lot and you freak out when the plane gets delayed. And
we're going to Lake Powell today.
Yeah.
And you're on a boat with 35, 40 people.
Yeah.
And so we're very selective.
Yeah. After about day 2,
you're very selective
who travels
on
well.
who you let on that boat. Yeah. Even before we let them on the boat, it's factoring who travels well.
Yeah.
Who brings energy and doesn't take energy. Who, we're like, we want to go have a great experience and we need everybody to travel well.
That's right.
And specifically when you think about yourself, you're like, I never want to be the person that's high maintenance. I never want to be the person that's like making it hard for anybody else. If the opposite, I want to be the one that's, adding value. And I'm always somebody that's put more into the pot than I'm taking out.
That's right. At the same time, you don't want to go to Lake Powell and be on your phone the whole time because you missed it. Like,
of course.
You didn't travel. It was right there. This amazing experience that you couldn't curate, create, pay for is right now. Yeah. Right. And so I think, for like my kids, it's really easy to look at it through the lens because that's what I'm doing, right? Like I'm raising a family. And so, it's a big rule in my house. Like there's 4 rules. One of them is respect, right? So if one of my girls says something mean to the other girl, it's not if I'm doing well, right? Half the time I'm not doing well because I'm just holding on for dear freaking life. But if I'm doing well, it's not stop doing that. It's, hey, that's your sister. Like, was that traveling well? Like you build people up when you travel well. You don't cut them down, right? And so at the end of the day, I want to travel well through this work experience. I want to travel well through this life experience. I want to travel well through my golden years as I get older. I just want to travel well. I just want to do that. And so at the end of the day, I want to look back at it and say, mistakes are fine. Mistakes are okay. It's not about making the right choice necessarily. It's kind of about traveling well. And so it's been a guiding thing for me that's really helped me keep my head, I think. And so back to like you come into this new business. Well, dude, just be cool. Like just be cool to people. And whether it comes back to you or not, that you traveled well. Do your best, right? Like whether you make $1 million or $200,000. Again, I'm the year that I wasn't proud of, I made more money than the year I was proud of.
Interesting.
Right? Like it's not about that. It's the faith and the idea of what are we really doing here? Like, what are we really doing here? I was at this concert. I'll close with this. I was at this concert. It was at Petco Field, and I'm still in some ways 14 years old. I get so filled up from like underground music and punk rock shows. So I was at this punk rock show. It was a special one because Jeremy Marshall was there with me, who passed away a couple years ago.
Who was it?
It was Rancid and the Dropkick Murphys.
Oh my gosh, how good was that?
It was so fun. So at the end, Rancid and Dropkick come out together. It's at Petco Field. It's like epic place downtown, Southern California, San Diego. And they're playing this song. It's called Take 'Em All. And they're playing together. So these 2 iconic bands that I grew up with, and they're just going nuts. And they remove security and they let people do whatever they want. So you can get on the stage and you can jump off the stage. And it was just it was just paradise in a chaotic way. And so I was in the crowd with Vern. And as people jumped up on the stage, the first thing everybody did was they took out their phones and they got like selfies of them singing into the mic or of the crowd. But on the screen, there was these messages that says, put down your phone. And the people on the stage can't see it. Everybody in the crowd can see it. Put down your phone. Life is a fleeting moment. When are you going to have this chance again? Enjoy the moment. And it was like, that's traveling well. Like, are you experiencing this? Are you contributing to this? Is it better because you were there?
Yeah.
Or did you kind of take away from it a little? And for some reason, personally, I have this like, I don't know if I want to call it a fear or a really strong desire to contribute. Like it would be the worst if I went with your family to Lake Powell and it was worse because I was there.
Of course.
That pains, or like I joined your sales team and it was worse because I was there. Your company. Like I love the idea of, that was awesome. It doesn't have to be he saved the trip.
Yeah.
But it was like, that was better.
Yeah.
Like that was better. And so anyway, you asked about faith. That's a rambled mess, but somewhere in there is kind of how I view it.
So I've done so many of these, and I think that's the most beautiful capture of a life philosophy in simple words. I think about the concept of traveling well, and it captures all of it. It captures the way you show up. It captures the way you prepare, captures the way you start, captures the way you finish. And so anyway, I'm going to shamelessly adopt it.
Take it
for my family.
I'm sure I stole it from somewhere. So
and for my personal philosophy, because I share similar beliefs. I've shared beliefs that, this window is a finite window. And even going back to where we started, we met 20 years ago. It feels like yesterday. Time is
we may have met a billion years ago.
Time is unique. Yeah, well, yeah. I do believe it. Like I believe that time is relative, and I experienced that when I think about us. Like that was yesterday, literally yesterday, and 20 years has gone by. But from the outside looking in, and just to cap it off, I think you have traveled well. In my interactions with you, and it hasn't been close. We've actually never worked together. Like there's never actually been a time where we're on the same exact team along the way. I don't think ever.
Yeah.
And so I've just been able to admire the way you do it and try to cherry pick the stuff that you do. And there's so much of it. And so I'm always cheering for you. I try to communicate that to you, that
it's been great.
Anytime that, you're winning, it just makes me happy, because I know that you winning equates to a lot of other people winning, because of how you pour yourself into the people that you serve, and, those leaders that I admire. So anyway, thanks for coming out, Ty.
Thank you, man.
Can't wait to see the next chapter, the 40s, and see what the 40s consists of. So see you, brother.
Thank you.